What if I told you that the most widely read book in human history is missing its most important characters? Tonight, we're diving into a biblical mystery that has haunted scholars for millennia. A question so obvious, yet so overlooked, that when you hear it, you'll wonder how you never thought of it before. Adam and Eve, the first humans, their three sons, Cain, Abel, and Seth. But wait, stop right there. If these were the only children mentioned, if humanity began with just one woman, then answer me this: who did Cain marry? The Bible clearly states that after killing Abel, Cain went to the land of Nod and took a wife. But where did she come from? How did billions of people emerge from a family tree with seemingly impossible gaps? This isn't just a theological puzzle. It's a mathematical impossibility that threatens the very foundation of one of humanity's oldest stories. Yet the answer has been hiding in plain sight, buried beneath centuries of selective storytelling. The truth? There were daughters, many daughters, women whose names were deliberately erased from history, whose stories were deemed too dangerous to preserve. If you're ready to uncover one of history's most carefully guarded secrets, stay with me. Because what we're about to discover will change everything you thought you knew about the beginning of humanity and reveal why some stories were meant to stay hidden. The expulsion and the birth of sorrow. Picture, if you will, the moment of ultimate loss. Not merely the closing of a door, but the shattering of existence itself. When Adam and Eve were cast from Eden, they didn't simply lose a home. They lost their very connection to the divine essence that had defined their being. The cherubim's flaming sword didn't just guard the way back to the tree of life. It severed the umbilical cord between heaven and earth. They walked eastward, these first exiles, into a land that knew no mercy. Where Eden had provided abundance without effort, this new realm demanded blood, sweat, and tears for every morsel. Where once they had walked with God in the cool of evening, now silence pressed against their souls like a crushing weight. They were alone, as no humans would ever be alone again, pioneers in the terrible art of mortality. And it was here, in this wasteland of consequences, that children began to arrive. Not in the perfection of Eden's garden, but in the harsh reality of a fallen world. The first birth cry ever heard echoed not in paradise, but in exile. Genesis offers us a tantalizing glimpse. After he begat Seth, Adam lived 800 years and begat other sons and daughters. Other sons and daughters. The text is clear, yet mysteriously vague. If humanity was to survive, if the human race was to flourish and fill the earth as commanded, there had to be daughters. Mathematics demands it, logic requires it, biology insists upon it. Yet their names vanish into silence, their stories disappear into the void. Why? What force was so powerful that it could erase half of humanity's founding generation from the written record? The brothers and the first murder. Cain arrived first, carrying upon his infant shoulders the crushing weight of being humanity's firstborn. Imagine the pressure, the impossible responsibility. He was not just Adam's son, he was the future of the human race made flesh. Every hope, every dream of continuation rested in his tiny hands. Abel followed, and from the beginning, the brothers embodied opposite forces. Cain, the agriculturalist, found his identity in coaxing life from reluctant soil. His hands became rough from the plow, his back bent from endless labor. He was the embodiment of humanity's struggle against the curse. By the sweat of his brow, he would eat bread. Abel, the shepherd, seemed to carry something different in his spirit. While Cain fought against the earth, Abel moved in harmony with his flocks. There was a peace about him, a connection to something transcendent that Cain could observe, but never quite grasp. This difference, subtle at first, would grow into a chasm that would swallow one of them whole. The day of offerings arrived like destiny itself. Both brothers approached the altar of the divine with their gifts. Cain brought the fruit of his agonizing labor, grain, produce, the very best his fields could yield. It represented everything he was, everything he had achieved through grinding effort. Abel brought the firstborn of his flock, not just any lamb, but the finest, the most perfect, the costliest offering he could present. There was something in Abel's offering that went beyond mere ritual. It was worship in its purest form, sacrifice that cost everything. And God, the divine judge, saw into the hearts of both offerings. Abel's was accepted, Cain's was rejected. In that moment of cosmic rejection, something died in Cain's soul, pain twisted into rage, disappointment fermented into hatred. The first seeds of murder took root in human consciousness. God, seeing the storm brewing in Cain's heart, offered a warning wrapped in mercy. Why are you angry, and why has your face fallen? If you do well, will you not be accepted? And if you do not do well, sin is crouching at the door. Its desire is contrary to you, but you must rule over it. It was an invitation to redemption, a chance to transform bitterness into growth. But Cain turned away from the light and embraced the darkness that beckoned to him. "Come, let us go out to the field," Cain said to his unsuspecting brother. Those words carry the weight of cosmic tragedy. The field, Cain's domain, where he ruled supreme, where he held every advantage. There, in the solitude of open earth, jealousy exploded into violence. The blow fell. Abel's blood soaked into the ground, becoming the first sacrifice the earth never wanted. Death entered human experience not through accident or age, but through the deliberate choice of evil. The first murder stained not just the soil, but the very soul of humanity. God's voice pierced through Cain's consciousness. "Where is Abel, your brother?" And Cain, now fully transformed by his choice, lied to the face of omniscience. "I do not know. Am I my brother's keeper?" The earth itself testified against him. "What have you done? The voice of your brother's blood is crying to me from the ground. And now you are cursed from the ground, which has opened its mouth to receive your brother's blood from your hand." Jubilees, the impossible fear. But here, in the aftermath of judgment, comes one of the Bible's most perplexing mysteries. Cain, upon hearing his sentence of exile, cries out in terror, "My punishment is greater than I can bear. Behold, you have driven me today away from the ground, and from your face I shall be hidden. I shall be a fugitive and a wanderer on the earth, and whoever finds me will kill me. Whoever finds me will kill me." Stop. Read those words again. Let their impossibility sink in. If the only humans on earth were Adam, Eve, Cain, and now the deceased Abel, who exactly was Cain afraid of? Who were these mysterious whoever that could find and kill him? The mathematical impossibility screams from the page. Was Cain's fear born of prophetic knowledge? Did he somehow understand that his parents would have many more children who might seek vengeance? Or did his terror reveal something far more startling, the existence of other human populations beyond his family? God responds to Cain's fear with protection. "Therefore, whoever kills Cain, vengeance shall be taken on him sevenfold." And God placed a mark on Cain, a sign that would protect him from violence. But what kind of mark? A physical brand? A spiritual aura? A reputation that preceded him wherever he went? The text remains hauntingly silent. Cain departed to the land of Nod, literally meaning wandering or restlessness, east of Eden. And there the mystery deepens exponentially. The Bible states with matter-of-fact simplicity, Cain knew his wife, and she conceived and bore Enoch. He built a city and called the name of the city after the name of his son, Enoch. Wait, full stop. What wife? Where did she come from? And more puzzling still, what city? Cities aren't built for populations of 3 or 4. They require communities, workers, merchants, families. They require a society complex enough to need organization, governance, trade. Who were all these people? 3 paths to understanding. Standing at this crossroads of mystery, 3 paths diverge before us, each leading to radically different understandings of humanity's origin. The path of necessity, marriage within the family. The first and most traditional path suggests that Cain married one of his sisters. While this strikes modern sensibilities as abhorrent, in the primordial world, it would have been not just acceptable, but inevitable. If humanity was to survive at all, the first generation would have had no choice but to intermarry. Consider the mathematics of early human survival. Adam lived 930 years according to biblical record. Eve's lifespan, while not specified, would have been similarly extended. Across nearly a millennium of life, they could have produced dozens, perhaps hundreds of children. Each generation would have multiplied exponentially. Moreover, the genetic concerns that make modern incest so dangerous would have been minimal at humanity's beginning. The human genome was fresh, uncorrupted by the accumulated mutations that make close breeding problematic today. The patriarchs themselves, Abraham, Isaac, Jacob, all married close relatives. The practice continued well into biblical history. This explanation has logic on its side. It resolves the mystery without requiring additional populations or divine interventions beyond the original creation. But it raises its own troubling questions. Why does the Bible, so meticulous with genealogies and family histories, remain absolutely silent about these crucial daughters? Why are the women who saved humanity from extinction completely unnamed in the official record? The path of hidden populations, God's other children. The second path ventures into more controversial territory. What if Adam and Eve weren't the only humans God created? What if the Genesis account focuses on them because of their unique role in salvation history, but other human populations existed simultaneously? This would explain Cain's fear, his mysterious wife, and the city he built. It would resolve the mathematical impossibilities that plague the traditional interpretation. Some scholars point to Genesis 1:27, which says God created man in his image, as potentially referring to multiple creations, with Adam and Eve being specifically called out in Genesis 2 for their special role in Eden. However, this interpretation creates massive theological problems. The Apostle Paul clearly states in Acts 17:26 that God made from one man every nation of mankind to live on all the face of the earth. If multiple lineages existed, the doctrine of original sin becomes fractured. If not all humans descended from Adam, then not all humans share in his fall, and not all humans would need redemption through Christ. The theological house of cards that would collapse under this interpretation makes it unacceptable to Orthodox Christianity, despite its logical appeal. The path of lost revelation. The Book of Jubilees. But there exists a third path, one that walks between orthodoxy and mystery. This path is illuminated by an ancient text that survived on the margins of Scripture, a book so detailed and specific in its revelations that it has been called Little Genesis. The Book of Jubilees, written in the 2nd century before Christ, claims to present revelations given to Moses on Mount Sinai alongside the Torah. While not accepted as canonical by mainstream Christianity, it was revered by the Essenes, the sect responsible for the Dead Sea Scrolls. More importantly, it provides specific, detailed answers to the very questions that Genesis leaves hanging in mystery. And in its ancient pages, the veil is finally lifted. The revelation of the daughters. According to the Book of Jubilees, Adam and Eve did indeed have daughters, not nameless, faceless breeding stock, but real women with identities, personalities, and destinies. The text provides their names, their birth orders, and their marriages with a precision that is both startling and satisfying. Cain's wife was named Awan. Seth's wife was named Azura. Suddenly, the impossible becomes possible. The mathematical paradox resolves. The fear that drove Cain makes sense. Humanity's survival strategy becomes clear. But more than solving puzzles, these names restore dignity to the forgotten women who carried humanity's future in their wombs. Awan, the daughter of sorrow. The name Awan carries layers of meaning that reveal the complexity of her character and destiny. In ancient Hebrew linguistics, it connects to concepts of desire, iniquity, and strength born from suffering. She was born into a world already tainted by sin, a daughter of exile rather than paradise. The Book of Jubilees places her birth in the first Jubilee period, making her younger than Cain, but old enough to marry him when he was cast out. Imagine her choice: remain with her family in the relative safety of their settlement, or follow her brother-husband into the unknown wasteland of Nod. She chose exile. She chose love over security, loyalty over comfort. When Cain built his city, it was Awan who stood beside him, not just as wife, but as co-founder of humanity's first civilization outside of divine blessing. She bore Enoch, whose name means dedicated or initiated, perhaps hoping that this new generation could somehow redeem the curse that haunted their lineage. Awan represents something profound in human experience: the woman who stands by faithfully even when the path leads through darkness. Her lineage would become the line of the Cainites, builders of cities, forgers of tools, creators of music and art, but also the inheritors of violence and pride. Azura, the daughter of heaven. In stark contrast stands Azura, whose very name evokes the blue of heaven and the precious stone lapis lazuli. Where Awan's name carries earth and sorrow, Azura's reaches toward the divine. The Book of Jubilees presents her as more than just Seth's wife. She was originally promised to Abel before his tragic death. Imagine the weight of that revelation. Azura was to have been Abel's bride, the woman who would have borne children to the righteous shepherd. When Abel's blood cried out from the ground, it was not just his life that was cut short, but hers as well. Her destiny was shattered by her brother-in-law's jealous rage. But God, in his mercy, provided another path. When Seth was born as Abel's replacement, Azura found new purpose. Their union was not merely practical, but prophetic. From their marriage came Enosh, whose name means mortal or frail, but whose birth marked a turning point in human spiritual history. Genesis 4:26 tells us something extraordinary. At that time, people began to call upon the name of the Lord. For the first time since the exile from Eden, humans actively sought God. Prayer was born through Azura's lineage. Worship returned to the world through her children. She became the mother of humanity's return to the divine. The divided destiny of humanity. From these two women, Awan and Azura, flowed two streams of human development that would define the character of civilization until the flood. Their children carried not just different bloodlines, but different spiritual orientations that would shape the future of the world. Through Awan and Cain came the line of achievers and builders. Enoch built the first city. Lamech's children became the fathers of technology, music, and metallurgy. Jabal became the father of those who dwell in tents and have livestock. Jubal became the father of all those who play the lyre and pipe. Tubal-Cain became the forger of all instruments of bronze and iron. This was humanity's technological revolution, born from the line of the exile. They were innovators, creators, the first to say, "We can build our own paradise." But with their achievements came pride, violence, and separation from God. Lamech, Cain's descendant, became the first polygamist and composed the first song of vengeance. "I have killed a man for wounding me, a young man for striking me." Meanwhile, through Azura and Seth flowed a different stream. This line maintained the memory of God, the practice of worship, the hope of redemption. From Seth came Enosh. From Enosh came Kenan. From Kenan came Mahalalel, and so on through the generations until we reach the towering figure of Enoch. Not Cain's city-building son, but a different Enoch altogether. This Enoch walked with God, and he was not, for God took him. Here was a man so close to the divine that death itself could not claim him. Through Seth's line came Methuselah, the longest-lived human in recorded history. And finally, through this lineage would come Noah, the man who found grace in the eyes of the Lord. There's the corruption and the mixing, but the story of these two lines takes a tragic turn. Despite their different spiritual orientations, despite the clear distinction between the godly line of Seth and the worldly line of Cain, human nature inevitably sought what was forbidden. Genesis 6 records the catastrophic moment when boundaries dissolved, when man began to multiply on the face of the land and daughters were born to them. The sons of God saw that the daughters of man were beautiful, and they took as their wives any they chose. The interpretation of this passage has divided scholars for millennia. Who were these sons of God? Traditional interpretation suggests they were the descendants of Seth, the godly line, who intermarried with the descendants of Cain, the worldly line. But ancient texts, like the Book of Enoch, present a far more disturbing picture. According to these sources, the sons of God were actually fallen angels, divine beings who abandoned their heavenly post to take human wives. These watchers, as they were called, not only corrupted themselves through forbidden unions, but taught humanity dangerous knowledge, the secrets of war, sorcery, cosmetics, astrology, and other arts that were meant to remain hidden. From these unholy unions came the Nephilim, giants who were mighty on the earth, heroes of renown, but also creatures of violence and corruption. The very name Nephilim means the fallen ones, and they filled the earth with bloodshed and moral decay. Whether through intermarriage between human lines or through angelic corruption, the result was the same. The careful separation that had preserved righteousness in the world was broken. Good and evil mingled until they became indistinguishable. Violence became the norm. Corruption became universal. The divine grief and the final judgment. It is at this point that we encounter one of the most emotionally devastating passages in all of Scripture. God, looking upon the world he had created, saw that the wickedness of man was great in the earth, and that every intention of the thoughts of his heart was only evil continually. And then comes the verse that stops the heart. And the Lord regretted that he had made man on the earth, and it grieved him to his heart. The creator of the universe experienced regret. The author of existence felt grief. The one who had looked upon his creation and declared it very good, now looked upon it and saw only corruption, violence, and evil. The daughters of Eve, who had been born to populate the earth with righteousness, had instead become the mothers of a generation that broke God's heart. But in the midst of universal corruption, one light still flickered. But Noah found favor in the eyes of the Lord, the Tao, not because he was perfect. The Bible makes clear that Noah was not without fault, but because he alone had maintained faith in a faithless generation. Noah, the descendant of Seth and Azura, carried within his family line the last remnant of the righteous bloodline that traced back to the prayer-beginning Enosh. When God commanded him to build an ark, it was not just to save humanity, it was to preserve the genetic and spiritual heritage that connected back to humanity's faithful beginning. Idilishil, the women who walked through the water. When the floodwaters receded and Noah's family stepped onto dry land, they carried with them the DNA and the spiritual legacy of both lineages. Ham, Shem, and Japheth were the fathers of the post-flood world, but they could not have fulfilled that role without the women who stood beside them. Noah's wife, whose name is preserved in the Book of Jubilees as Zara, was the daughter of Rachel, a descendant of Methuselah. She was the great-great-granddaughter of Enoch, the man who walked with God. In her womb, she carried the continuation of the faithful line that had stretched back through Seth to Azura. The wives of Noah's sons, again preserved in ancient texts with names like Sedekatelebab, Naeltamawk, and Adatanises, represented the convergence of all human genetic heritage. They were the new Eves, the mothers of the second beginning, the women through whom humanity would once again fill the earth. But unlike the first beginning, this time humanity carried the memory of judgment. The Rainbow Covenant was not just a promise that God would never again destroy the earth by flood. It was a reminder that judgment had already come, that righteousness matters, that choices have consequences that echo through generations. Jari, the pattern continues. The hidden heroines. As we trace the story forward through Scripture, we see that the pattern established with Awan and Azura continues throughout salvation history. Again and again, the women who shape destiny remain partially hidden, their full stories left in shadows, while their male counterparts receive the spotlight. Sarah, the first matriarch, endured decades of barrenness before becoming the mother of the promise. But how often do we consider the faith it took to leave everything familiar in Ur of the Chaldees and follow her husband into an unknown land? How often do we contemplate the courage required to laugh at God's promise of a child in her old age, only to discover that the laughter of disbelief would become the laughter of fulfillment? Rebekah engineered the transfer of blessing from Esau to Jacob through elaborate deception. Traditional readings condemn her manipulation, but what if she was operating from divine revelation, ensuring that God's prophetic word came to pass? What if her actions, like those of Awan and Azura, were necessary for the survival and continuation of the covenant line? Rachel and Leah, the sister wives of Jacob, between them bore the 12 tribes of Israel. Their rivalry and struggles gave birth to the nation that would carry God's revelation to the world. Yet their personal stories of heartache, competition, and longing often get lost in the grand narrative of patriarchal succession. Even in the New Testament, the pattern continues. Mary, the mother of Jesus, receives honor as the God-bearer, but her cousin Elizabeth, who recognized the Messiah in her womb and prophesied over Mary, often fades into background. The women who supported Jesus' ministry, Mary Magdalene, Joanna, Susanna, and many others, provided the financial and logistical foundation for his teaching, yet their stories remain fragmentary. The archaeological whispers. Modern archaeology has begun to uncover evidence that supports the existence of these forgotten women. Recent discoveries in Mesopotamian sites have revealed marriage contracts, legal documents, and religious texts that describe sophisticated family structures in ancient civilizations that align with the timeline of early Genesis. Tablets from Mari, Nudzi, and other ancient cities describe practices of levirate marriage, adoption laws, and inheritance customs that mirror the complex family dynamics implied in the early biblical narratives. These discoveries suggest that the social structures necessary to support the multiplication of humanity from a small founding population were not only possible, but were actually practiced in the ancient Near East. Moreover, genetic studies of human mitochondrial DNA, which is passed down exclusively through the maternal line, suggest that all modern humans trace their ancestry back to a remarkably small population, possibly even a single woman who lived in Africa approximately 200,000 years ago. This mitochondrial Eve provides scientific support for the biblical concept of a common female ancestor for all humanity. While these discoveries don't prove the specific details found in the Book of Jubilees, they do establish that the biblical account operates within the realm of historical and scientific possibility. The forgotten daughters of Eve could indeed have existed, lived, loved, and shaped the destiny of our species. The theological significance. But why does any of this matter? Why should we care about names lost to history, stories relegated to apocryphal texts, women whose existence can neither be definitively proven nor disproven? The answer lies in what these forgotten daughters represent, the principle that God uses the humble, the hidden, and the overlooked to accomplish his greatest purposes. Their stories remind us that heaven's value system operates on radically different principles than Earth's recognition systems. Awan chose exile and built civilization in wasteland. Azura chose faithfulness and birthed the line of prayer. Both choices were necessary, both women were essential, both contributed irreplaceably to the unfolding drama of redemption, even though history largely forgot their names. This pattern reveals something profound about divine methodology. God doesn't always work through the famous, the powerful, or the publicly recognized. Often, his most crucial work happens through people whose contributions remain invisible to history but are fully seen by heaven. The daughters of Eve represent every woman who has ever carried life forward through difficult circumstances, who has made sacrificial choices for the sake of future generations, who has maintained faith when recognition was absent and appreciation was rare. The continuing mystery. Yet even as we explore these ancient texts and historical possibilities, we must acknowledge that much remains hidden. The Book of Jubilees, while detailed and historically valuable, is not scripture. Its accounts, while plausible, cannot be verified with absolute certainty. The names it provides, Awan, Azura, and others, emerge from the realm of tradition rather than divine revelation. This uncertainty is not a flaw in our investigation, but a feature of faith itself. God has chosen to reveal some things clearly while leaving others in shadow. He has provided enough light to walk by, but not so much that faith becomes unnecessary. The mystery of Eve's daughters teaches us humility. It reminds us that our understanding is partial, our knowledge incomplete. It calls us to trust in God's goodness and wisdom, even when his methods remain opaque to our limited perspective. The eternal significance. As we reach the end of our journey through this ancient mystery, we find ourselves not with complete answers, but with deeper appreciation for the complexity and beauty of God's redemptive plan. The daughters of Eve, whether named or unnamed, remembered or forgotten, played essential roles in the survival and development of humanity. Their lives remind us that every person matters in God's economy, that every choice echoes through eternity, that every act of faithfulness contributes to the grand tapestry of redemption. The women who walked in Eden's shadow and beyond carried not just the biological future of humanity, but its spiritual destiny as well. In our modern world, where recognition often seems more important than reality, where visibility counts more than virtue, the daughters of Eve offer a different model. They show us that significance doesn't depend on fame, that importance isn't measured by publicity, that the most crucial contributions often happen in private, unrecognized by history, but fully acknowledged by heaven. Their stories challenge us to examine our own lives. What hidden contributions are we making? What unseen sacrifices are we offering? What quiet faithfulness are we maintaining, even when no earthly recognition follows? And they remind us of something even more profound, that God sees everything, values everyone, and uses the humble things of the world to confound the mighty. The daughters of Eve may have been hidden from human history, but they were never hidden from divine love. Their legacy lives on in every woman who chooses faithfulness over recognition, who values future generations over present comfort, who maintains hope when circumstances seem hopeless. In a very real sense, every woman who has ever lived stands in the tradition of these first daughters, carrying forward the divine mandate to be fruitful, multiply, and fill the earth with the knowledge of God's glory. The mystery remains, but the message is clear. In God's economy, no faithful life is forgotten, no sacrificial choice is wasted, and no hidden contribution goes unrewarded. The daughters of Eve may be lost to history, but they are forever found in the heart of their Creator. And you, what do you think about these forgotten daughters who shaped humanity's destiny? Leave your comment sharing your opinion, and don't forget to like if the content brought you value. To not miss the next videos from the channel, activate the notification bell, and remember, by becoming a member, you not only directly support this work, but also get early access to all this knowledge. I'll see you in the next video. Thank you for watching, and may God be with all of you.